Hello, everybody. You are listening to the Sinister Story Hour, a podcast brought to you by the Western Skies Podcast Network. Here we discuss a new case each week. We talk about crime, cults, conspiracies, and all things sinister. If you enjoy the show, please like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Sinister Story Hour and on Twitter at Sinister Hour. You can also help support the show for as little as 99 cents per month. As always, thank you for listening, and let's jump in. On the afternoon of February 15th, 2018, a neighbor hears gunshots. Instead of immediately assuming the worst, she just thinks maybe someone's slamming doors next door. In reality, it was the neighbor shooting their own dog. That dog would be found the next morning along with 4 dead bodies in the house. We'll be right back with the rest of this story after a quick break. Hey guys, have you thought about making your own podcast, but you're not really sure where to start? That's how I was at first, and really the only choice that stood out to me was Anchor. And let me tell you why. It was completely free to start, and it has all the tools that allow me to record and edit my podcast right from my phone or computer. And they distribute the podcast for me, so it's heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other platforms. There's no minimum listenership, and you can start making money from day one. And really everything you need to make your podcast is all in one place. I love it, and I know you will too. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Sinister Story Hour with Steph. Thank you so much for joining me. Tonight I really do have what I would consider an extremely sinister story for you, and there's a lot to it, it seems like. So please join me for the rest of this story. I was fascinated. It was one that I had never heard of until researching, so I hope this is one that you haven't heard a whole lot about and one that you enjoy. So first, let's back up and talk a little bit about the Stuart family. They were what seemed to be a really happy family, just a perfect little family of 4 living in Keego, Michigan. The dad was Dan, and Dan was incredibly smart. He was a software designer at the University of Michigan Medical School. He was described as being so smart that he literally had an IQ that was above the point where it could be measured. So I can't even imagine having that problem, to be so smart that nobody can even tell you how smart you are. But that was Dan. The mom was Lauren, who was a 45-year-old model and personal trainer. She spent much of her time working on her home and decorating, and she just really took a lot of pride in making her home beautiful and feeling like just kind of a sanctuary for her family. She was physically beautiful, as you would have maybe guessed by being a model and personal trainer. She put a lot of effort into her outward beauty, but she was very, very inwardly beautiful as well. And pictures of her, she just really is very radiant and naturally beautiful. I mean, she's not like wearing a ton of makeup and all done up. She just really is very naturally gorgeous person. And aside from that, she was very religious. Lauren herself had lost her mom at the age of 12 or 13. And at that point, she had really kind of grown distant from her father and at least some of her siblings. Now, in later years, they would blame that on her husband, Dan, saying that Dan had kind of driven a wedge in between them. But it doesn't seem like even after the death of her mom that the family was very close after that point. Their son was a 27-year-old named Stephen, and Stephen was described as also being very highly intelligent. He had the same talent as his dad with working with computers and doing things like that. He had been around his dad a lot and had learned a lot from him, and he was just very talented working with computers, and that was what he actually studied in college. Their 24-year-old daughter, Bethany, was a graphic designer and a very passionate artist. She was very artistic, creative, and just loved creating things and was just a real kind of free spirit, just a very beautiful person as well, it seemed like. Now, the family at one point had been members of the Church of Jehovah's Witnesses. And I am going to start this and preface this by a big, I'm so sorry if I get anything wrong, please let me know. But I am not familiar myself with the Church of Jehovah's Witnesses. and their practices or their beliefs. And so I am going on exactly what I found in research and things like that, but I don't myself know much about the church. I don't know anybody who is personally in the church, and so I just don't really have anybody to bounce ideas off of or get opinions on things. So if I do give out some information, please let me know. And it's definitely not on purpose. But at one point, they were actually ostracized due to some differences in opinion on education. And that was about 10 years prior. It was about at the point where their 27-year-old son was going to college. He was going out of high school. He was starting to look at colleges. And Dan at that point had been very, very adamant that their son was going to be attending college, and then very adamant that their daughter would follow suit and would also get the opportunity to attend college. And that just seemed like something that he was very, very important to him. He didn't have a whole lot of opportunities to study or to go and do a lot. And so it was kind of like he was going to give his kids every single opportunity that he wasn't blessed with. And so that kind of became a really sore spot among the church. The elders of the church did not agree with that decision. And many Jehovah's Witnesses don't actually typically support the idea of higher education. They kind of look at it as a waste of time because they view us as being in the very end days and Armageddon is near. So really, why do you want to go to college if we are approaching Armageddon? What's the point? They also denounce the moral problems that college can cause. They believe that young people deal with a lot of temptations on college campuses and that it's just too much for them. And in a quote straight from the church's official publication called The Watchtower, in 2005, they're quoted as saying, quote, "University and college campuses are notorious for bad behavior, drug and alcohol abuse, immorality, cheating, hazing, and the list goes on," end quote. So that is their opinion on going to college, that it does more harm than good, and so they just don't really see a value in it. As a result of this, they were kind of called in to speak with the elders. Dan was very adamant that I'm not changing my mind about this, and they were disfellowshipped by the church. And so that ended up being their choice to go ahead with the education, and I absolutely support that. I mean, I think that they made the right decision, but it just made things very, very hard for the family afterwards, because after they were disfellowshipped from the church, a lot of the community that they were a part of before completely shunned them. And it seemed to be extremely hard on all of them, but more so on Lauren, because she was very religious. She was very much into the church, into the beliefs. She very much believed what they were teaching, and she was kind of stuck where she wanted to be loyal to her family, make the decision for her kids, but she also felt like she was making the wrong decision when it came to the church, and she didn't want to be out of the church. So a lot of this information that I have actually comes from Lauren's friend and close friend, because she actually went through the same thing. Her name is Joyce Taylor, and she was a former member. Like I said, she went through the same process of being disfellowshipped, and due to that, they kind of had this kinship where they understood what each other was going through a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the disfellowshipping process. I had never actually heard about this. Similar to what other churches would refer to as excommunication, which I am familiar with the idea of excommunication. So it's basically similar to that. It's a process where a member is simply asked to leave the church. And it's a time that's meant for repentance. It's a time that the church actually wants them to go and properly repent, change the behavior, and prove themselves to be worthy of being reinstated. Now, that was the idea behind this, but I mean, shunning people doesn't really typically make people want to come back, but that's a whole other thing for me. But unless that really happens, these members are encouraged to avoid these sinners, and they are considered to be ostracized from everybody. They are considered to be people that you no longer associate with. You should not be around them because, like I said, they are considered to be sinners. And so they don't typically have relationships afterwards with those who have left the faith. Now, in the same way, this is exactly what happened with the Stuart family. Like I said, they were ostracized and shunned by the members of the Kingdom Hall, and therefore, basically, their whole community that they were kind of a part of, because they had this church family for so long, was just basically shunning them. Now, on the day that this happened, Lauren Stewart had decorated her home for Valentine's Day, and she sent her son a special message inviting him over, and they were going to have a special party or just some kind of Valentine's celebration. And she basically kind of lured in there with the idea that this is what was going to happen. It turns out that her family hadn't really gathered in the home that evening for a Valentine's Day celebration. They had gathered to actually die in that home together that night. Lauren's daughter, Bethany, had been shot in the head while she was sleeping, and Lauren had placed a pillow over her head in an effort to suppress the noise. Lauren's husband, Dan, was on the basement floor in front of the couch, and her son was also found shot in the head as well, and there was a handgun located at the scene. Lauren herself was found at the base of the stairs in a corner with a pistol next to her, and she had shot herself in the eyes, which is something that she had previously researched. They did find that out later. Now, it turned out that weeks before she did this absolutely unthinkable act, Lauren had been completely distraught and plagued by her own fears of her family and what was going to happen in the end times and what was going to happen to them if Armageddon was to come soon. Now, as a result of all of those fears, she had been researching suicide methods on YouTube and also had researched how to use a Glock handgun. So she did have quite a bit of preparation leading up to this in order to actually commit this day. She made a 2-minute video prior to this, and she said she was broken and she didn't want to burden her family and that she had so many problems and she just couldn't do it anymore. In another short video, she brings up an occasion of childhood sexual abuse, which does make me wonder if she had suffered some sort of sexual abuse as a child. I wonder if that's why she had drifted from her family at that point. And I don't know that for a fact, but it just seems like that could be one of the reasons that she had drifted from her family and gone kind of a different path. And she claims in this video that that sexual abuse that she suffered as a child had driven her to want to do this. Now, prior to the crime, she put 2 notes on the dinner table. One was to the medical examiner, and one was a suicide note. So she tidies up her house. Again, I said she makes her house kind of a reflection of how she wants to be, right? She wants her house to appear perfect and calm and tranquil and just a happy place. And she tidies up her house that day before all of this and texts a relative. And she also texts her husband's boss and then turns over all of the family photos on the desk. The note said, quote, "I allowed evil into my heart when I chose not to accept God's free love, and it made me sick inside. I killed my family because I know my death would stumble them. At least now they will not suffer and will be resurrected into love forever in peace." End quote. Now that is so horrifying. And in that, it just makes me think that she didn't want her family to suffer by losing her. And she also wanted her family to be resurrected with her. And so that was part of her motivation for doing this. The message to Dan's boss simply stated that there had been an accident and he had died and that more details were to come. Now, the family member that she had texted was actually her cousin. And in that text, in